information forms at the front desk before you leave today. This presentation, if everything works out, is being recorded and live streamed and will be also available for viewing after the workshop today. Today we'll look at new tools from AI-driven site plan analysis and automated zoning checks to geospatial systems and collaborative platforms that are changing how municipalities manage development proposals. Excuse me. The aim isn't to replace human judgment, but to see how these tools can support your expertise, context awareness, and ethical discretion as board members. I will give you a little anecdote of how I recently used AI and to do a dismal amount of paperwork filing. So, as many of you work in municipalities, the Office of the State Comptroller requires municipalities to file an annual financial report. Well, nobody told me that when I took the job over 10 years ago. So we had 10 years of delinquent filings. So I asked AI to take the last AFR filing and our last audited financial statement and learn how the numbers go from one to the other. It was able to create a 5-tab workbook with all the account codes that the comptroller's office uses using the numbers from my financial statement. And then I was able to upload a PDF of my financial statements for the next 9 years. I did the same thing. So instead of taking weeks and weeks and weeks, this took me 4 hours, 5 hours. So the potential here is real, and I'm excited to contemplate how we can use that as planning and zoning board members. So I'm pleased to introduce our speakers today, and thank you so much for them for being here today. John Scavo is the Director of Planning and Zoning for the town of Clinton Park, with 24 years of municipal planning experience with Scavos in the private sector, with the LaBerge Group, and now with Clifton Park. He leads everything from comprehensive planning to zoning enforcement. He holds an MBA from Southern New Hampshire University and a BA from LSU in Portland. Our other speaker is Uchitelle. I should know that. He's the COO and co-founder of Uchitelle. Previously, he headed Dragon 360, a digital agency in Kingston. He has led nonprofit tech efforts at Code Communities here in Albany. He's also serving his 3rd term as an Ulster County legislator. So he's a glutton for punishment on Ulster County, and then what goes on down there. So please join me in welcoming John and Amy.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. It's a good group. I knew we were going up against the 11th session, which has been a hot topic since January. So I wasn't sure how many people may have been again.
Maybe like a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. But glad to see a full room here. Has anybody used AI? Excellent. Has anybody not used AI? Good too. One of the things with AI is in 2020, I was looking at what are the adaptation skills we're going to need in a hyper learning environment. And one of the books that was seeing a citation here was from Professor Edward Hess, and he teaches at the University of Virginia. And he coined the term hyper learning because he saw AI intelligence in terms of algorithms faster than humans could calculate. So the algorithms are based on human programming, but the output can be done much quicker by the computer or the AI intelligence than the human going back and redoing that formula. The example I'll give somebody is Jack Carr. Well, people have heard of him, author, terminalist. He just put out a new book, and he was talking to the author of the Da Vinci Code, to his buyers, and he says to the author of the Da Vinci Code, "Who do you think smarter, you or your character?" And he says, "My character, because it took me 5 days to write how to figure out that puzzle. It took my character 10 minutes." So that's how I view AI, is you set up a platform. It's good for inputs and outputs where you have repetition and you're looking for feedback for business improvement, creating feedback loops, hyper learning for adaptation through those feedback loops, and smarter governance, solutions for governance. One of the things I found during COVID is I had higher participation from a younger age cohort to planning and zoning board meetings when we were digital using tools such as Zoom. There's other, tools out there, but that age group was less likely to come in person when those meetings were no longer available online. Even if the recording's there, they're not watching it. But if they sit on their phone, I like to say on a computer, I think to sit on a computer, looking at it on a phone today, they don't have a problem looking at that while they're watching sports scores. So they also multitask very well. I did notice that. And, one of the things I think AI can help augment to get that age cohort back into participation in meetings, because once COVID ended, we had to go back to in-person meetings, and trust me, strong benefit to that, having human contact, interactions, and dialogue. And I feel like I had a greater reach to a more diverse population through the computer. So maybe AI will be an answer to help augment that. Because as a meeting facilitator, it's hard for me to facilitate my planning board meeting while doing the IT stuff. Here today, I got Mark sitting here doing the IT stuff. I had to do both. It was a challenge. Understanding hyperlearning, again, getting beyond the technical skills. I think one of the biggest skill sets is you have to be agile. And we have to have a openness, not just technical fluency for thriving in this changing world. That means what I might have learned 5-6 years ago and carry preconceived notions today may not be relevant anymore. So how do I adapt to that change and basically learn a new paradigm or look at information through a lens? One example I'll give folks is, has anybody used Power BI on top of this? This problem with big data. It's basically Excel on speed where I'm creating interactive dashboards. I can tell you when I learned my MBA, I was studying formulas. I was learning how to drop and drag the information, clean and scrub data. I can now take that data before I bring it in, clean and scrub it using AI to just say remove the duplicates from this list. It is done. And I can ask it to export that to another list so I can cross-reference it just to make sure that the accuracy is there. So I felt, yes, I got a value out of my MBA, but a lot of those technical skill sets I learned are no longer relevant because they've been replaced by AI. You can go back to the 80s to computer programmers. They'll tell you the languages that they learned back then are no longer relevant today. That's AI. It's just happening at a faster pace of worse or not. So it's an interesting time. It's an exciting time. 25 years of planning experience today. I like the ability that, I'll give you another example, cell towers. Most planning and zoning board members probably doubled the cell tower over the last 30 years. 25 years ago, we did a balloon test to see what the photo set would show based on the height of the balloon and then how it looked like the picture. Now I've got a drone flying it at the exact height. I don't have to wait for the wind to be less than 10 miles an hour because the balloon on the telly will do one of these, not give you an accurate reading. We have the drone go up there. It can hang a ribbon so everybody can see it. And we can fly it at different elevations to see what if we did lower 5 feet? And what are the existing conditions with that drone and that tethering attached to it and bring it? And then AI now, where somebody would have to use a graphic image and import it in, you can tell AI now to overlay on a certain height and scale a tower with certain dimensions, and that image will generate. If I go back to the 1970s with my planning files that have been digitized, I can see landscape architects with the lost art of colored pencils, drawing in hand sketching vehicles from the 1970s. Now it's dropping it in through AI, asking it to show in spacing when there's gaps to increase shadows to meet the sun in the picture. And where you might have a static picture, we can also, down through AI, take a two-dimensional image, because in the planning board world, in zoning, we're often looking down at a site plan, and we can turn that into a three-dimensional model and maybe do a drive-by simulation. So when we do these corridor linkage plans, like Sandy spoke about on the transportation improvements, when I'm looking at a two-dimensional image, it's not going to be too far in the near distant future that it's going to be affordable to put that in the lower budget plans of drive-by 3D simulations. And, I'd like to say you'd be able to put on your AI goggles, which will probably just your regular glasses. And we'll be able to play that for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abe, who's going to run through the next couple of slides.
All right, thank you so much, John. So a little bit of background on who I am and just what I'm going to be speaking about. So again, my name is Uchitelle. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Uchitelle. We have a software platform that planning boards use, that planners use to help manage their planning boards. And our company is a few years old, very active in the Hudson Valley. But we use the degree to which we use AI is really, really significant. I use AI for some of the kind of tasks like, we heard Mark describe, like these kind of tasks that just for running the business. I need to do a performance review. What format should it be in? I need to file my, some state taxes. What format should that be in? Things like that. We're also using AI to build our software. We actually are able to generate code and make changes. Oh, we want to try this new feature. Can you make us a functional, design for this feature? And the platform is actually able to do that for us. It is going to have a huge impact on software engineering industry. They're kind of building their own device in some ways, but it has changed the way that we have scaled up our team. We're actually able to offer a platform at a much lower rate than we would have been if we actually had to have a development team of 10 people. We're able to do it with a handful of people that really supercharge our development. And the other way that we use AI is we actually have it embedded in our software. It's something that we're rolling out right now. And I'm going to talk about some of these ways. But for the next couple of slides, I'm going to share some of the philosophies and some of the ideas that you have to hold in the back of your mind as you're starting to consider how you use AI in your workflow. And one of the most important things is the concept of maintaining a human in the loop. So AI is a very, very helpful tool for servicing ideas. If you find yourself struggling when you look at a blank sheet of paper, how to get those first thoughts down, AI is wonderful for that. But at the end of the day, you have to think of it as a system that always has you in the loop. And this is really significant when we're talking about the planning process, because there's a statutory requirement that planning, that especially in New York, that a site plan follows certain criteria, and that those statutes don't say that AI is going to take this over. They say that we as planning professionals, our planning boards are going to be making these reviews, and so AI can help give us a head start. And it really is really important that we're keeping the human always in the loop. And the way that we've designed AI to be used by our customers in our software is never to have AI putting something in front of a site, planning board applicant, never to have AI putting something in front of the general public, to have AI putting things in front of our planners, to have AI putting things in front of our staff, so that they can review and say, okay, I like that. I'm going to use that word. Oh, I'm going to dig into that a little bit more. And I'll share a little bit more specifics about what that looks like in a moment. Another thing to keep in mind with AI is AI itself. John mentioned how important it is for us to keep constantly learning as users of AI, but AI itself is constantly learning. It's the models themselves are being updated all the time. And every time the model updates, its behavior is going to change a little bit. And we hope that every time they update the model, it's going to change it's going to change for the better. But we have to verify that. Sometimes there are regressions. Sometimes things they go a little bit sideways. So you really need to make sure that you are always maintaining yourself in the loop, because the outputs, if you think about software, the software that you might use today, in most instances, the inputs that you put in, if you put the same input in 10 times, you're going to get the same output 10 times. But with AI, that's different. Even with the same model, you'll get 10 different outputs, slightly different. Now, you're always going to be a little bit, similar, and there should be guardrails in place to do so. But not only is there going to be variance even using the same model every time you ask the same question, but the model is going to update. And so you're going to need to keep track of what outputs are. You don't have to be an expert in the models, but you have to be an expert in the final output that you're putting in front of your constituents, your staff, your planning board, whatever it is. So as I mentioned, AI, in a nutshell, really always needs to be checked and verified and human endorsed. And then the last thing that I want to say about the human in the loop is it's really important to be transparent. In our view, it's very important to be transparent about the ways that you're using AI and the ways that you're not using AI. AI is not replacing site plan reviewers. It's not replacing people to necessarily communicate with applicants. It's really important that there's a human in that process that's in that driver's seat. But there are certain aspects that you should be transparent about. I find as people start to implement AI in the workplace, sometimes you don't want to admit, I used AI for this, or I used AI for that. I think it's really important to say, get over that stigma and say, yeah, this is the way that I'm using it. And I can endorse it because I reviewed it. And this is an output that I feel very solid to put in front of you. It's not AI endorsing it, I'm endorsing this. One thing that's really significant with AI is when you start using it, if you're using ChatGPT or using Claude or using any of these programs, one of the first things that we might think of is how to ask the question the right way. And this is really important. That's called your query. How do you ask that question? But the other really important part of this is context. Well, what source material is that question going to look at? And so all of these programs allow you to add a source material. You can add municipal code. You can add other output documents, right? To say, hey, I need to write a resolution that is to approve this site plan. Here's what a bunch of other resolutions look like, right? And I want you to give me an output, a first draft of this resolution that's going to look like that. That's the project context, right? So the query is really important, what you're asking for, but also important is what you're loading into the model that will help you produce that query. So managing the context is in some ways as important as managing the workflow. It's also important that you're thinking of the context as something that's always updated, something that you're always kind of feeding into the model. I have this very kind of frustrating, busy work task that I do every Monday where I recap some of our wins and some of our efforts with our sales lead. And it requires me to go through a bunch of emails, just keep track of everything. And I've basically automated this. So I'm able to, have a bunch of copies of these emails. I load it to the platform and I say, hey, I want to rate this email. Every time I do that, it outputs the email. And the very last thing, but the very first thing I do when I go into the AI program the next week is I load in last week's email. Here's what we did last week. I want you to keep getting better at this. I want it to learn how I'm feeling about its output, right? And so that context is continuously updating. It's not like a one and done type thing. You're actually always refining that context. Here's how you did last time, and here's what like going forward. So now we're getting into some of the ways that AI can be used in the planning process. So this is a screenshot from our software. And I think there's you're going to see a lot of software companies that, whether they're in the planning space or the permitting space, building permits, or if it's really any space, especially like any constituent services, you're going to start to see more and more AI integration here. And this is an example of one thing that's very challenging with the planning process is you get a lot of documents from customers. Our software does help a lot with this, because the customers are able to put the documents in the folders themselves rather than just dumping them in an email to you, and you have to figure out which document to switch. But let's say you're in this situation where you have to figure out which document to switch, which is the site plan, which is SWOOP, and so forth. Well, one of the things that we've implemented is being able to have the program classify which documents are which and make suggestions. But these are fundamentally suggestions. If you look at the button here at the bottom, this is to add the AI analysis to the file, right? This is not to send it to the applicant. This is not to put it in front of the public. This is to say, hey, here's what we think this is. And if you want us to tag the files this way, click this button and we'll tag it. Or if you want us to run the model again, we'll do that. So in this case, we've uploaded a CEO letter, denial letter for a building permit. And that's going to be like the first step in the case of this customer for in their site plan process. And we're adding that to the software. It's telling us where it should go, and it's telling us exactly what's happening in there. So this document summary was generated by AI, but once it's been added, once that user clicks that button, they're endorsing that. They're saying, yeah, this is what I want it to say. And then the other really, really helpful tool is, like I said, sometimes the hardest step is when you're kind of looking at that proverbial blank sheet of paper, right? What's the first thing that we do? So the first pass review is really, really helpful to be performed by AI. Now, the final pass, obviously, that's something that you're going to have to endorse. But in this case, we have an AI chat in our software that allows you to ask questions about a project. So let's say a customer submits a site plan application. You're going to be able to go and say, hey, can you do a quick review of this? So in this case, I asked the chat feature, which is embedded in our software, are there any setback issues with this project, right? And it's saying, yes, actually, there's a few setbacks. There's class 2 wetlands, there's 100-year floodplain, there's a bunch of things that you're going to want to look at here. That's the first pass. You're going to have to go and look at those areas, dig into them. But one thing that's really nice about this is the context shaping. Like, you can obviously go out and start using Claude or ChatGPT, and you can kind of build these models yourself. But one thing that's nice about using the tool that specializes for it is we're able to put the municipal code in, and then it's going to query that code and anything else that's there. It knows that you're in New York, it knows about seeker. It's going to be able to query all of these things. So you're going to be able to ask it quick questions. It's not going to solve all of your problems. You still need to perform that review. It's just going to give you a head start on that. It's going to identify areas that need more information, and it's going to serve as specific sections of the code that you're going to want to look at with your attorney. You're going to want to look at it with the applicant. All of that's going to have to happen. So, really, in some, there's a huge step forward that's happening right now with being able to use AI for these various usages. But at the end of the day, and this is going to be the case, hopefully, for a long time, it is really, really critical that the human, that you guys are all kind of maintaining that review. I do think, I predict that we're going to see some efforts to have AI perform the whole review for certain types of permits. I'm seeing this start to get piloted in other states where they're trying to hit certain targets, like how quickly they can turn around a certain type of permit. So certain instances where you're trying to do the whole life cycle with an AI agent, basically. And we're a little bit less bullish on that. We're really in the mindset of empowering users, empowering our planners, empowering our customers, rather than trying to replace that review process. So that's a little bit about our philosophy. And before I hand it back to John, I'll just mention, I'm happy, during the break, I'm happy to go deeper in any of these specific topics. There's also a really interesting conversation about the future of AI and what's actually happening there. I'm happy to go very broad on that as well. I see hands up. Do you want to do questions now? It's up to you. Okay, cool. Let's take some questions. So I saw James first. I said, but he's like, give me an example. The music sound code is a great example of radio. So give me an example of how either your tool or ChatGPT or backdoor. Do you have to tell it where to go look for the code, or will it automatically find it eventually? Something like this. Yeah. So one thing that in my opinion, AI really, really struggles with is using the internet. So if you were to say, hey, can you look up the, City of Albany municipal code, I would not trust what AI would come back with. Now, there was a recent update with some of the models that illustrates a little bit better what steps it's taking, and it'll actually show you how it came to that, which is actually something that I think the AI companies are implementing, because the truth is they don't actually know how the models work. They know how they built the models, but they don't actually know what's happening with the model. When they are trying to figure out what's happening with the model, they ask, what are you doing? And the model has to say in English, if it's English, like already they got to say, what they did to do this. But the truth is that the model isn't thinking in that language. They're thinking in a million different ways with ones and zeros. So I don't really trust that type of context searching on its own. So what would be important, so what I would recommend is you actually output the code itself. So if you have access to, if it's on eCode 360, like you would take your section 125 subdivision code, your section 140 zoning code, or whatever the issue that you applicable, load it in there. The way that we handle it is we loading the code for you, and then that way you know what's in there, and it's going to query that code. But you could potentially do that using a chat bot by loading it in. I wouldn't trust it to search for it on it. But
this is very, very interesting. I'm a landscape architect. Oftentimes I'm working with a civil engineer wanting to build reports for big projects, and I'm playing around with this myself. Like you said, go to E code, find code municipality. I give my PDF, my due diligence, and say, hey, answer all these questions, and then tell me the link where it is. But I also got myself down changing my due diligence report to make AI the answer better. So now that I'm a member of my local planning board, I think about this impact here, and should we be looking at changing the way review processes are done to allow AI to provide better answers? Where's that line that we want to cater to AI versus what they are supporting in that process of review?
Yeah. My answer to that is really AI to take the first pass. I think that individual planning board, I envision a future where individual planning board members might be using it as a degree that really is aligned with their own comfort level. Folks, everyone knows this. There's a very wide range of skill sets that are represented on the thing, which are all volunteer boards, at least in the state. And people come from a lot of different skill sets. So not everyone's going to be using the tools the same way. Planning professional shouldn't be thinking about the knowledge, should be thinking about how to get the right information for that board and thinking about their workflow. How is this going to help speed up my workflow, help me manage more effectively? But really, it's about not what is the information, but how do I get the information in front of the right people that way? So it really depends on your output. For you, in the use case that you described, it might be those first pass of servicing some of that view, and then the final pass of flow management. And you can also feed AI outputs back into itself, right? And so you can have a document that illustrates all of the issues that might come up that you output from the platform, and then you have a different chat or a different program that you're running, and you put that in to get that final document out, and it'll format it for you. That's
what about you're talking about putting data back in, and in case of code and stuff that's basically public data. So what about its proprietary information? Once you feed it back in, what happens? In other words, is that now public information? Does the AI program, can use it for somebody else who has similar question? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm tempted to ask you to give me an example of proprietary information, but I feel that I couldn't probably answer the question about it. But I am curious, what type of proprietary information?
Salty, my analysis of the data, I consider, the client may consider that belongs to me. I'm paying you to do this. But it might be useful if I've got concepts that I'm trying to develop as a recommendation to a client, put it in AI and see if they come, how they approve it. Even for, doing a final copy of something, where you've got your report and you want AI to publish it, you put it in there. What happens?
Yeah,
Anybody get that done?
Yes. So I think one thing I want to mention about this is I have found myself using FOIL as a litmus test for a lot of these things. If it's something that would be foilable, which doesn't really necessarily answer your question, but I do want to just kind of point out that a lot of those things could be foilable, especially if you're providing them to the municipality.
Right.
But then I think the broader question is, what does the AI model do with the stuff that we put into it, right? Where is it saved, and what are they doing with it? And largely what they're doing with it, and this isn't to wash their hands of it at all, but they're using it to improve their process. They're kind of using the models to determine what they've given us the output that we want, and if they haven't, they might look at that in a different way. It'll become part of a large data set. It'll become part of a large data set in such a way that it would be impossible to pull it back out as its own document. If you loaded a document in there, it's not like someone would be able to be like, hey, does anyone using ChatGPT add in the client documents? Can I see that? Like, no one will be able to do that. However, I think it's a very real concern, and we're like the level of privacy that this is opening up is really, really significant. I mean, there are people using AI as their therapists. In fact, it's one of the most common use cases for AI is for it to be used as a therapist. I don't know about the conversation you guys have with your therapist, but the conversation I have with my therapist damn well better be private. I have concerns about that, honestly. Yeah. I know that doesn't totally answer your question, but
That question that you just said, if I asked it as, competitor or another town or whatever done this, will it feed me back what they put in?
it won't feed you back what they put in. It'll do its own research of what if they because you can ask for sources with AI, and the source will never be. I saw another user add this. Here it is. The source will be like, I searched for it. I found this formulation back from the face of that type of thing. Although they might use what that other person put in to try and guess what you want back.
If I use City because it gives you some.
Right, exactly. I use Claude for the same reason. I almost never use ChatGPT because it's a little bit hard to follow along with that.
But and then to answer your question, know that there's setting ChatGPT where you can go in and turn off who already for everyone else, and that's a way to obviously keep your information private.
Yeah,
Linux and whatever using that, you hit that setting of your information shared. I've used it before.
Yeah, and I think that's a common setting for a lot of cases. Like even when you're signing up for an app, like it'll say like send issue reports to improve the program. So just for everyone who might not have heard that, a lot of the AI programs have a setting that allow you to say whether whether they can use your data to improve it. I have a very low level of trust in them using my data the way that they say they're going to. There have just been too many issues over the years of data being like the asset that's getting abused. And so it is a little bit of a mindset, being like, you know what, this is all going to be out there, and I'm gonna allow AI to have access to this. I do think that if there was ever like AI creation, like logins for AI programs, and you can actually log in and see someone's chat history, like that would be devastating. And one of those breaches, like, will happen in the future. It will certainly happen at some point. Just like all kinds of breaches that still all kinds of embarrassing things for people over the years. AI will be to that one. Yeah. Yes.
So in keeping with that kind of question, I've been playing around with chat, like in Copilot. A couple of times I'll ask them the same question, just kind of compare the outputs. They're kind of interesting to see. Very similar generally, but when they generate a response to me, is that only coming back to me on my database, or is that out there somewhere? I feel like the way it's presented, it'll even say, hi, Sean, or, it starts to personalize its responses to me. But I feel like it's only coming back to me at that point, and it wouldn't be available, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's how it's supposed to work, and I trust that it doesn't work that way. But it is true that it is becoming part of this larger data set. Assuming that there's not only a security problem, it will only be for that.
But it's important to note that at least with some of the basic ones like ChatGPT, that engine is learning about you that every word. Right. It's something that for the last 5 or 6 months, and is definitely learning about it, about you, how you ask questions, what you're looking. Right. And I don't know if ChatGPT communicates those things back to mothership. I know it's simple little thing like I worked for Xerox, and you look at the background, and everybody when they install their drivers would always say, yeah, install the drivers inside of that. negative that was coming back. So I think that there is a risk, and I don't know if we're really going to get them the answer.
Right. I also don't think that the AI companies actually know the answer. The way that I heard this on a podcast, now man, it's scary. It is a scary thing. So the analogy that I heard on this podcast today is that we think of like AI as this plant that's been grown by these companies, right? And we know that it's not static. Like it's not like you build a house, it's just a house that's built. That's how software is. That's how like the other 99% of our software works, right? You put in one input, it's always going to be set up. You upload a site plan, it's always going to go to the same plan element every single time. You send a request for an applicant for an updated SWIFT. They're always going to get a request to submit an updated SWIFT. AI is a little bit different. This is why we're kind of like putting it into our program with some very intentional guardrails because we don't want it to kind of take that over. So that's the way that software kind of used to work. The way that our software works is you build a house and every time you walk in the front door, something comes out the back door, it's always the same. AI, when you think of it as like growing a plant, and the plant is kind of growing on its own, but we're growing it, and that's fine. But I've heard now that that's not even the case. You think of it more like we built a planter and we poured dirt in it. We actually don't know what's growing in there. We can't see it. We know that fruit is coming off of it, and the customers seem happy with the fruit that's coming off of it. But we fundamentally don't know what that plant looks like. We just know the planter, the pot that we put out for the plant, and we use it something is producing fruit. And so that's like kind of a scary concept, but it's really a matter of like using it for the context that you're putting into it is going to be a suggestion, a kind of a helpful first pass, and there is a certain amount of kind of surrendering to some of the data being out there. Like the good news is everything that we're putting in is publicly available in the first place. So it's like, are we kind of living the same? But one of the things actually that I wanted to mention as you're asking the question, maybe this is my last comment before I hand it back to John, is one thing to keep in mind with AI, and this is when the usage data gets sent back to the companies, this is really what they're doing one day. AI, there are no one directives. The thing that they want to do, the thing that an agent chat bot wants to do more than anything else is it's not provide the right answer. That's not necessarily AI's directive. We hope that that's always what it does. And if we give good guardrails, that will always be what it does. But I'm going to want to verify it. Isn't it the 100-year flood thing? Like I want to go and look at that. I want to see that for sure, right? And even if, using our software, we'll just go make sure. But AI, they want us to make you happy. Yeah. They don't want to be right. They want to make you happy. So they're sometimes going to give you an answer that they think is going to please you. And they'll sometimes defend that answer, right? I had a situation recently with one of the bots, but I won't say which one. And I was using it so our software outputs like building permits and things like that, right? So an applicant submits an application and it automatically creates a building permit that you can print off and put on the wall. And I was building this document and I just wanted to extract it. It's a customer data. It's just like a PDF, right? I wanted the text and copy and pasted it. And the word building was spelled like the I was in the wrong spot. I was like, that's crazy. Like, I can't believe that this municipality has had a huge typo on the title of a building permit up on everyone's wall and so on. And I went and looked and I was like, wait a minute, no, it's not misspelled. Not at all. And I went into the app and I was like, it's not. But why is the building spelled like that? And it was like, well, it was spelled like that the way the municipality gave it to you. And I thought, I was like, no, it totally wasn't. And the AI chat had the gall to say, yes, it was. And I was like, it absolutely wasn't. Please go look again. And Whitey looks and was like, oh, wow, you're right. And it actually said, you're right. I was wrong to assert that it was right. But that it was spelled like that. You're right. It wasn't misspelled. The misspelling was on my fault, like my fault. And this is the latest model from one of the largest programs. So this is why when I emphasize human in the loop, this is really what I'm talking about. If I went with that in front of the customer, that would be egg on my face. I don't want that to happen. So it's really important that you maintain your role in this whole process.
Look how you trust anything is going to
You not on its own, right? You would never just send this to a investor. I would send this to an applicant. You'd never send this to a municipality. You would never just send this. This is to help you so that you can do your review. So it takes some of that, like first, looking at the blank sheet of paper, and it's not replacing anybody yet, but it is going to help get that review started. All right. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Todd. Thank you.
Yeah, what did Rumsfeld say? Trust but verify?
I was just going to say, trust and verify, trust your input, but at the same time, you need to verify the outputs and the information being provided. That's a good way to look at it. One of the things I want to do with the next slide here is just go over AI driven board learning and where I found it helpful. And it's not going to come back and bite anybody. And then Article 78, which is always a place to start, is pattern recognitions of blind spots. So what I'm looking at is, I had 60 copies. I apologize if everybody didn't get one. We will post it with a video. I can send it to Mark. But it's basically an AI-driven example that if you were to take and use Microsoft Copilot, which I think is the same as ChatGPT, to get a bunch of this data, you would be able to basically see what your outputs are going to do. And again, this example is not going to create any situations that would get any more in trouble. What I did here is I just took, basic information from a query, and it could be a document that you upload, the project file. And you could say, from this document, fill the project name, location, data review, data approval, and planning board members or zoning board members present at the time of approval. From there, you can look at adding phase summary information, number of comments received, so I can upload all the public comments. I had a very controversial subdivision in a rural part of our town where I had 100 plus letters. I read all 100 plus letters as a triple did, but if somebody said summarize that, what was the most common themes? I could take that as a PDF document and ask, instead of sitting there with a highlighter, when I read, I could basically ask it to pull out the common themes and then batch and sort the common themes with numbers. How many times did individual people mention traffic? How many times did they say the same thing? So you want two different letters submitted on two different times. So that's a good way of making my life easier and gathering data. I can have table outputs, but I can summarize, tell the story now. Assist with that aspect. And then I look at that data and I verify it. One of the things, with planning board beginning minutes is they provided great feedback loop. I like to see, did anybody say, well, I feel that's a board number? Because you feel it really shouldn't matter. It's based on section, whatever the code. You may say based on 25 years experience, but we need an engineer to validate or a landscape architect to provide additional information. I'm looking for those type of phrases, and you can ask, what type of verbs you were used to provide absolute certainty, such as will or shall, versus moderate or medium certainty of will, could, versus weakest, which is can, for example, or most likely. I never use will, most likely. Yes,
So, John, so you have the written comments, right?
yes,
Clear. That's just what they said.
correct.
At a meeting, you're going to have perhaps a video documentation,
Correct.
and you're going to have secretary that's going to paraphrase, which doesn't always get it.
Doesn't always get it. Correct.
Because for input, can you be putting in a video conversation?
You can. You can actually.
And that's a
This
any emotion will permit, because you're asking
Yes.
about in this handout, the sentiment.
Yes, sentiment is very important. Emotional tones. I can basically say, based on John Scavo's statements in these meeting minutes, what was his overall tone? Was it emotional? Was it factually based? Was it impersonal? Was it combative? And it'll give you feedback and coach you along. That's that feedback. I'm not looking to change somebody's minutes per se, but I'm looking to learn, evolve, and see what I should avoid from lessons learned. So that's that after action report that we'll get to in a slide.
Can AI interpret audio instead?
It can do audio, and we're doing it right now through Zoom. Zoom is actually recording the conversations here today. We'll provide a meeting summary. And in that meeting summary, and I just said I'm going to give Mark this document. It's going to capture the fact at the end of that meeting summary that John Scavo said that the after action report example will be provided for anybody to get.
Okay, I can't help following up with this one.
All right.
But this trying to please you, as you said, you got a contentious meeting. Does it say everything was on your door? No. No, because it knows that we're not gonna be pleased by a widely inaccurate thing.
Correct.
Yeah. I want to add to this. There's tools that we're using today to make that brings forward really objectively just what was said at the meeting.
Yes. So
They just record from the audio when you leave the meeting. It's emailed out, and I can go home and read the transcript, like listen. So there's a lot of tools just to capture.
there really is.
Whether it's a public hearing. I mean, there's a lot of different packages that are already out there.
The New York State Committee for Open Government, they actually use Otter AI, which is a tool. So any planning board saying, geez, the thing of New York State have an issue, if we summarize the minutes with this, they're using it. So,
It takes the subjectivity out of our clerk that's either taking notes or decide the type of minute or just try to reread them after the meeting and what was said.
absolutely. I also like the fact that I can check and cross-reference based on who was intended. Did all of them vote on motion and resolutions? And sometimes,
It summarizes everything.
yeah, you can end up with cut and paste that someone who wasn't at the meeting all of a sudden appears. And the draft 7 minutes can help target that. So this example is just some tasks that I'm saying, you can play around with, nothing earth shattering. Gets you into just trying to figure out assumptions for those feedback groups. It's something that I still recommend talking to boards and having that dialogue with what can we do better. But AI can also help offer strategies too, and factual-based strategies on something being taught at universities. You can ask for peer-reviewed source information models, for example, on communication techniques, and it'll provide examples.
So with different AI software determine what is considered combative.
Yes, it would. It would. And what's interesting is the tone sometimes. I know this gentleman, you said you were in the copier business. I've seen copiers that come and are manufactured in a different country. And when it's translated to English here, it seems very impersonal when I'm looking at the prompts. And it might not be quite the same way I would say in English. So I know it's probably a translation versus a company that, if it was manufactured in the US, might be more relatable to its prompts to me and the way I would speak. But then if we then translated it to another country, they would be saying the same thing. I am scratching my head sometimes. I know what it means. It's just how I would say.
And I'll just add, you can also, you can kind of sneak some context into your query when you're asking the question. Like, for example, let's say there's some part of the meeting that stands out to you as contentious. You could say, I thought it was really contentious when Jim said the following. Was there anything else in the meeting that was contentious? So now AI knows that you thought that was contentious. So is there anything else similar there that it's going to classify? So you kind of define, like, what do you think contentious is when you ask the question? I thought this was contentious. What else fits into that category?
And I can print, what Abe said really is an AI. They should input and output in terms of the repeatable function. So I can print a report knowing what my review patterns were from all my events last year and what the timing was for each step. But then I can take all those reports, give it to AI and say, what was my biggest barrier based on the timelines? And I can find out, it might be an outside agency's review that's auto-electing projects. It may also be that in 62 days, we need to make a decision, but we keep extending it with the applicant's permission, and kicking the can. And then I can look, well, was it considered a controversial project in that bucket? Most likely it was. So you can look at certain patterns and blind spots, and that's where it just sometimes brings those to light. One of the things that AI I will speak to really from a cool thing and practical standpoint, I think we can all relate to is right now, public meetings, I got 3 of them coming up in a week. My public meeting announcements all say, one's 2 are transportation plans, one's a linkage study based on transportation also. They all say within 72 hours, if you are hearing impaired or need a sign interpreter to notify us in advance if needed. We're going to get to the point that it's going to be an AI bot that's going to be doing sign interpretation right up here at the corner of the screen. I've already seen that actually recently in a presentation where the person looks human, but didn't have to worry about the bloopers of somebody thinking they were doing sign language that they hired. So that's something that's going to change. The 72-hour period, maybe contact me an hour before, so I can have that plugged in for that meeting to be available. AI solutions. I'm just going to show you some of the things we're talking about within Clifton Park and things we're planning for that may seem high in the sky, but are here today. And I know Liz, to your comment about who may be listening, I can tell you, my wife and I were talking about buying new vacuums. We didn't look at the internet, but the minute I went on the internet, my phone ads for vacuums were coming up. So it's always listening is my take on it. And if I'm saying it and the power's on in the house, somebody's listening. So that's kind of where I'm at with that aspect of it. But a lot of the infrastructure impacts, the accessory dwelling units and aiding smarter urban planning decisions. What I'm doing now is I'm using AI to basically look at my single family and 2-family numbers that I get through the building department and planning department of what we've approved and what's been built. Bringing that out now easier into geographic areas to see where the concentrations are. We're also implementing something in Clifton Park to regulate short-term rentals. If anything, just to get a handle of what neighborhoods are. We don't know. The way we find out about the short-term rental right now is somebody complains there's too much garbage and the cans can't handle it. And we investigate and find out it's short-term rental. I know other communities have bigger issues. We don't know how big of an issue because we don't have that data. So I'm going to be using it for projection modeling, also optimizing renewable siting, community solar projects. I know where the Shades 3 power is. I know where my community solar projects are. I can probably guess where my battery energy storage systems are going to be proposed to go. And I can look at what the type of issues are and look at what the emergency services are. And I can gather concerns and survey information from emergency service stakeholders and synthesize their answers in a report that AI can provide me. So those interactive dashboards, they can take that data and basically give me the information that I need to input to create that dashboard in a way that's hopefully going to work. We can hit the button to make it run. Enhancing public engagement. I can use AI to personalize outreach. I can have somebody, if they want to put their name in, basically generate follow-up that's more personalized to that person's concerns. If they said, what their concerns are, maybe it generates a personalized letter saying that the following 3 items that you think are most significant, will be reviewed by staff and will be considered prior to the public meeting that you'll receive an invite it's going to be different than the next person's letter because their inputs may be different. The other thing I'm looking at in terms of AI solutions is how it's going to balance microgrid technology. We know power generation in New York State nationally is an issue. We know our infrastructure today is antiquated. And, if Alexander Graham Bell was to look at this phone, he would not recognize it because there's no technology in this phone that he created. But if we had Thomas Edison or Nikola Tesla look at a transformer on a pole outside, they would recognize that same technology. So we know that infrastructure needs to change. In order to change to microgrid technologies, I'm going to be looking at AI to help drive some of the considerations of that every community is going to have electrical engineers, but we need to have access to resources of expertise that are available let's tell us that we can tap into.
We're also going to need to produce a lot more electricity.
We are absolutely.
Because I do it varies all the time, and I'm probably using a time or wasting a ton of CPU cycle someplace in the cloud.
Very true. Absolutely. This slide here, I'm using AI to now recognize corridor patterns and recognition. There's certain programs, transportation programs like MyoVision that uses a camera-based technology that can use intelligent signals and adjust based on actual traffic conditions. It could separate out a bird flying by the camera at 80 miles an hour versus a vehicle and throw that out as an anomaly. We can also look at a delivery vehicle as an anomaly, stopping. That could skew data on when it hit a camera here versus a camera here. It can also look and separate out pedestrians and cyclists in the directions that they were going. All camera-based technology. What I'm looking at with this slide also is Clifton Park. We took over from National Grid our lighting. So we do not own the poles, but we own the lighting fixtures and the lighting arms. We retrofitted sensors. Those sensors allow, through a cell phone, to dim and brighten based on the ambient light at that time of day, time of year, and weather conditions. Those same sensors aren't at 100% capacity because I have the ability that a smart car is able to talk to those sensors in the future. Certain lights might be off at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. You only come on within the corridor as the vehicle approaches and exits that corridor, or a person who's linked through a Wi-Fi network like that sensor. So I have sensors, almost like cells in the body, stem cells that could play different roles. Once it's programmed to do that, these sensors in our traffic signals, I have overcapacity of what we're using for technology that's here, not here yet, but I know it's coming. And then boards embracing AI technology. Biggest thing to wrap things up, as we get towards the end of the presentation, is again cultivating hyper learning in terms of folks here today, assisting to human education. We need to recognize that learning is going to continue to evolve at a pace that we need to be able to adapt and show that we're agile to change mindsets as we go forward for technologies. I can tell you, 10 years ago, I never thought I'd be looking at marijuana cultivation facilities in the Zombie Code of New York State. That's a big adaptation from what I learned as I went back to second and fourth grade in the 1980s. That's being agile. Piloting and testing feedback tools, gathering feedback to refine approaches and lead effective change. And then again, the after action report model, I think, is a low-hanging fruit that we should all look to do. The good thing with after action reports is you can open it up to your stakeholders ask them the same questions as a follow-up when you close out to a project to the public, answer that applicant, see what their answers are and how they compare to what the planning board information is in your after action report. And you might see information through different lenses too, where improvements can be made. And AI can help find these blind spots in the information. And then distributing AI-driven insights across departments strengthens collective intelligence. That's breaking down the silos. As I get more information in the planning department, it's easier for me to put it in a format that my Parks and Recreation department and messaging that they'll look for different than my legal department. So I'm breaking down the silos, but I can also tell the tone and the intent and focus on the data towards what we need to give value to certain stakeholders to make it more likely they'll review it. And maybe each stakeholder gets their own summary based on the department of interest. And then finally, these are the references we use for the slides. One of the things AI has forced me to do, and I was talking to Todd before the meeting, is I use my primary sources now. When I send an advisory memo to the town board, I'm using APA style formats, and I'm falling out a resources page that they can check and verify. I used AI yesterday because I had a phone call on my lunch hour, but it was the town supervisor. She picked up the phone. And it was, can you tell me where it is in the code that requires a property owner to connect to a store if it's if it's available to their property, which sentences fail? And I said, yeah, I know it's within 100 feet. Don't know exactly where it is in the code. And I went to Copilot right here. I said, based on the town of Clifton Park code, what does it say? It says it's not required in the town of Clifton Park code, but it makes a reference to Appendix 75A of the New York State Public Health Law. It said, pull up Appendix 75A of the Public Health Law, give me the direct link to the New York State website. It did that. Took me right to it. I saw right where it says, if sentence fails, 100 foot is the rule that you can apply to compel somebody to connect. Had the answer, verify, trust to verify. So that's what I possibly just recommends for folks. And appreciate it. If you have any more time.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes for questions. So now you join me in thanking Gabe and John. Very good. I will also thank Gabe for not making it at all sales pitchy for his platform, but I encourage you to check it out. Really cool. I would also encourage you to see how the town of Clifton Park has incorporated AI technology in the planning board, permitting, and all that stuff. It's really cool. So anyway, we'll take questions.
Is there any restriction on the use of AI for
If I was to be just
like activities?
there are no restrictions yet. Will restrictions likely come? Absolutely. I don't think it would want me setting up AI to see who might be interested in the fantasy football. Stuff. Something along those lines. I do things like everything else. We'll probably see policies catching up. They're usually catching up to the technology. Folks here today, you're in front of the technology. I do think that's good. And
so I'll just speak to that a little bit. Should I use the mic? So I think that we're going to see states are starting to do summits around implementing policies at the state level. I think New York is actually a little bit behind in some of this work. There's some really big issues for other departments, not necessarily planning, but DSS. There's a lot of personal information that's protected by HIPAA. How is that information operating over into an AI model to do anything? They need to figure that stuff out. And there also needs to be internal workflow policies for how AI is being used for quality control reasons. And this is something that's going to probably have to happen at a local level, where every IT department at every town, village, and city is going to have a policy for what tools you're using, how they get checked. We're kind of in the I don't know if anyone was involved in government maybe 20 years ago, or not 20, maybe 15 years ago, when everyone was using social media. And we had this period where they're have the intern sign up for Facebook. And then a few years after that, I was saying, have the intern call that intern and find out what the password is for Facebook. We now have a policy that ends it all, and you have to figure it out. It's going to go through that right now in the like have the intern do it phase, and except that we're all doing it, and so it's going to get reined in terms of like how like standard operating procedure type thing.
So I will say, and sorry, I have a great example. Now they have a policy that's the wrong policy. Todd brought this up. It's the New York State DEC. They have a very binary process of determining whether or not a community is eligible for X, Y, and Z. Perfect task for AI. They have been advised by their attorneys not to use AI. So instead of immediately determining whether or not something is eligible for something, they have staff and other people that are outside the agency opening up a whole host of other issues of consistency of review into that process, and taking months and months and months to get those reviews done, when they could have done immediately, effectively, and effectively. But they choose not to.
So I guess my question is like, as again, kind of going back to some of my other experience using AI, I used it to help me write or master plan. I did all the research, figured out a timeline, had my sources. I'm not the best writer. I had to sort of generate first draft. And then there's a part of me that sees like, okay, well, I'm going to give it to someone, and then they're going to AI read it, pull out that exact information. Like, why are we writing anything at all? Why is everything on such a bold list just to make everything easier to go back and forth?
I mean, that honestly, that kind of thinking is the kind of thinking that's going to define what happens 10 years from now. Yeah, I mean, if enough of us are asking those kinds of questions, like we will see the tools getting shaped a little bit differently. Like I definitely like there are times like my co-founder and I both have our own accounts with all the platforms, and there's times I'm like just have my Claude talk to your Claude, like and figure this out. You know, would that be possible? We can see both in our calendars and everything, like just figure out when you're going to be productive. So I think that is in our future, yeah.
But it also means that AI could be a big pause button for the evolution of the English language or any language, because languages always evolve based on culture and other factors. But if it's AI talking to AI, humans using AI, we basically hit the pause button on the evolution of language.
One of the things that I've done, and I know I'm going to sound archaic here, Scott, my coworker, can attest to it. I use a fountain. Reason why I use a fountain pen is I don't want to look like I'm from the 1700s. But when I write, it's very much more deliberative. It requires me to focus. So it allows me to write on a style that I focus my mind better than just with a regular ballpoint pen. So as we evolve the technology, I regress in my pen skills to make sure that it focuses my brain for writing.
But that fountain pen is style.
That's right. I agree. I like that. And I'll just say, like, there's some of these bigger picture things. Like, I'm very concerned about the way that AI is going to affect people who are learning. They're going to have AI with them the whole time, because, like, one of the challenges I think that we all face in college is what do you do when you're staring at a blank piece of paper? And like that experience of looking at a blank piece of paper and the thought that you have to take to like, what's my first type, writing going to be on this paper? That's something that folks aren't going to really experience, and that your mind not being challenged in that way with a really open-ended blank piece of paper experience is going to produce different. We're just going to have different skills, and it is probably. I have some concerns about this. And there's a question over here. Yeah, that.
Yeah, we set up the email wasn't really capacity to some work on organizing that policy outside of that. Are you calling out different projects, like a chat for emails, a chat for this, and it's a project piece, but sometimes also we're kind of if like we're calling the previous iteration that I might have like learned as a part one engagement. So I can leave like these this is iteration one, you refer to it as this, and then finally you're on the
Yeah, so it seems to change as they update the model, the way that is working. So what I have found is the as the models get more powerful, they also get more expensive, meaning like resource intensive, and they all have to put limits because we're burning up these server farms in Texas or whatever, right? And that's the issues with the grid. It's going to be a real issue. We're going to need AI to help us fix the grid because all the AI we're using. And what it seems like is you can't, these long conversations get really, really challenging. So you can't just have a long conversation where it has had 10 weeks worth of emails and each week being updated. You have to start new conversations. And so what I'm finding is that the best thing to do is when you finish a conversation, figure out what outputs are going to be helpful. Like, okay, you helped me with the email. Like, you also give me bullets on what you did differently next time. And then load that in next week when you start it and the output document. And that can be helpful for figuring that stuff out. The other thing that makes this all more helpful is that the AI models are getting better at remembering other conversations that you have with them. So they used to be really challenged. They used to just, even a year ago, most of the models couldn't. I couldn't be like, hey, I asked you a couple of weeks ago, do you remember me asking you about this? They'd be like, I can't look at the other chats. Now they can actually say, oh yeah, this worked well for you last time, or whatever it is. But I find that the most important thing is to be super intentional about the context that you're putting in and really don't rely on AI to make anything up. You just be like, here's what I want you to look at. And this is, and not only here's what I want you to look at, but here's what I want you to look at. Source document, the context came from another AI conversation you had, that you're also looking at it too, being like, yeah, that makes sense to me, because you sometimes need to get it back on track with that. Yeah.
I'm actually AI to analyze questions that could ask it. That's the AI about the close patient.
Yeah.
Tell you your trends.
Right. And I will also say, we use a lot of meeting transcription. And what I'll do, like I had to make a case study the other day, and I took all the transcripts for all the conversations that I had with the customer for like a 12-week period, and I loaded them into the AI program, and I said, what are some of the best quotes that this customer has ever sent to me? And it pulled out there's a huge ego boost, but it pulled out all the best quotes, and so like that type of thing can be helpful also. So like there was also a time where I want to be really transparent. I got into a big argument with my co-founder last week about something, and there was a point in the call where I was like, I just said this, and he was like, no, you didn't. I was like, well, we're both transcribing this right now, so we'll just go look at it. And we didn't exchange notes, but I'm certain he looked at it, and I know I did. And I like loaded it into AI, and I was like, this is where I went the therapy route. I was like, I just had this conversation with Lou, like, who do you think is right here? What do you think is how here? And of course, AI being so diplomatic is like, well, in some ways he was right, in some ways you were right. You had some things you were right about. Here's some of the things that you said, and he had some things that really good points that you should consider, and here, and it's important, and I like what you said here and what you said there, and that can be helpful. Yeah, it did calm me down. I've got one question here though.
How are biases being measured in the different models? And are there any patterns emerging right now about like blind spots or biases that we should be aware of?
That's a great question.
If y'all didn't hear, the question was about biases in AI.
Yeah. So AI, there's a question right now in this country about what our history is. Like what is really going on when we're asking about questions. How did we fight the Civil War? Right. These are real questions that are being asked in parts of the country right now. AI is going to have to help us answer those questions. The way that you load that information in is really, really critical. And I am concerned. I try not to get political with some of this stuff, but I am concerned that there's pressure on AI companies to do less to monitor bias. We saw an update with the AI that Twitter uses, where the AI was literally saying favorable things about Nazis. I also see some stuff in the press about others saying good thing about Nazis lately, and it's really, really concerning. It's part of a larger thing, and I think that it is going to be one of the tug of war assets is how we control for bias, and I'm concerned about it. Yeah.
I do hope, though, AI will be the death of social media trolls. Because if you really want to refute an argument that some asshat is making on social media, who is, using a logical fallacy, but you don't have 2 hours to look up your argument and cross-reference it, you can just copy and paste their comment and say, point out the logical fallacy and give me examples of how to go. But that's really toxic for your mental, so I wouldn't suggest.
Yeah, my social media.
Well, I think it would be the death of social media because people will just be arguing using AI, which makes the human connection of social media irrelevant.
You might have hit on it in the last comment here is that question, and that was when you look at the way, interestingly said, well, don't use the internet and you feed it to certain things, you'll get the right responses, or that makes sense. But most people they're not high-end users. It's just another search, but AI is giving them the answers. And we live at a time in which there's an extreme division. It doesn't take much to see that. You watch one news station versus another, and they're like two parallel universes, and creating this idea that we're only two types of people in this country. You're on this side or you're on that side, right? So you're probably then going to get a set of answers, maybe even in different places. That gives an answer in one way versus an answer in another way. So it's going to be a strange time for actually sorting out what the actual truth is, right? With these competing ideologies coming back as truth. So I'll let you respond to that. But then the hefty one, what I just heard you say earlier was with your argument with your co-founder, maybe there's a solution in there that says, well, this side, you're saying this, but you're also saying this, and this side. So here's the points for agreements between the left and the right, and maybe that goes up.
Honestly, the resolution of the day of my co-founder, and I hope he doesn't watch this recording. He wanted me to call someone that I didn't want to call them. I went in to do it, honestly, just really honestly. And I was like, I asked the guy, look, you must be to call this person, but I don't feel like that call's going to go, honestly. Like, I'm kind of hot about this whole thing. And he was like, why don't you date AI? I was like, this is what I would suggest saying to your co-founder. And I literally just copied that into Slack. I just said it. And my co-founder, he was just like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it was not something I would have thought to say. And it really didn't diffuse the situation. So that was really, really helpful. On the question of bias, one thing that you can do, and it's like, even by asking about bias, you kind of almost like show your cards as someone who is thinking critically about bias, and a lot of people are not. But if you are, I would suggest asking AI, what types of biases do you think it might have shaped this answer? And AI will tell you. Some of the comics I look at is this. The history was mostly written by this type of folks. Like, these are some of the things that might go into this. Remember that the answer is giving you is the answer that it thinks will satisfy you. So it might not be like it's having to translate ones and zeros into English, and it's not thinking in English. It's thinking in a language we don't know. So how the bias is actually playing out is going to be hard, but it also has studied a lot about bias, and so it knows how to answer those questions about bias.
Yeah, but thanks again, John. Hey,
And I will hang out for a little bit if anyone's questions.
that's great, guys.
It's steps go.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm not. He's still.